Hey everyone, welcome. Today we're going to take a journey, a spiritual pilgrimage really, through 5 absolutely incredible psalms. You might have heard them called the Songs of Ascent. That's Psalms 121 through 125. They basically map out a journey of faith that you'll see is just as relevant today as it was thousands of years ago. But before we dive in, just think about this for a second. What does a journey of faith actually feel like? It's kind of a roller coaster, right? It's got its highs and its lows, those moments of fear and then sudden bursts of joy, times you feel desperate and then other times when you feel completely secure. Well, these ancient songs, they capture that entire spectrum. Now, these psalms weren't just written in a void. You can think of them as the original road trip playlist. Seriously, they were the literal soundtrack for ancient Israelite pilgrims who were traveling uphill or ascending to get to Jerusalem for the big religious festivals. Each song kind of marks a different leg of that trek, both physically and spiritually. So here's our game plan. We're going to walk through each of these 5 psalms one by one. We'll explore how the pilgrim's perspective changes, from needing protection to feeling this incredible joy, then pleading for mercy, testifying about being saved, and finally, just resting in total security. Okay, let's start where every journey does, right at the beginning. Picture this. The road ahead is long, maybe a little dangerous. The pilgrim feels vulnerable, and the first thing on their mind, the most urgent need, is protection. So the psalm kicks off with this really powerful image. The pilgrim looks up at the hills. Now, we might think of hills as beautiful and majestic, but for a traveler back then, hills could hide robbers, or they could be places where people worshipped false gods. So this isn't just a statement, it's a question, one that's born from anxiety. Where is my help really going to come from? And bam! The psalm immediately answers its own question. You gotta love the contrast here. Help doesn't come from the created things, like the hills. It comes from the creator of the hills, the Lord who made heaven and earth. I mean, that is a huge shift, right? From a place of total uncertainty to absolute confidence in the ultimate source of all power. And this isn't some distant, passive kind of protection. The psalm lays out these very specific promises, showing God as this active, 24/7 guardian. He won't let your foot slip. He never sleeps on the job. He is your keeper, protecting you from evil and watching over every single step of your journey. You're going out and you're coming in. This is where the pilgrimage begins, with this solid guarantee of a divine, unsleeping protector. All right, so let's move on to the next stage. After getting that assurance of protection, the pilgrim's whole focus shifts. Now the destination is finally in sight, and that feeling is no longer anxiety, it's just pure, unfiltered joy. You can just feel the buzz in these words, can't you? And notice, this isn't a solo trip. I was glad when they said unto me. The pilgrim is part of a crowd, a community, and you can imagine their shared excitement building until, finally, their feet are standing right inside the gates of the holy city, Jerusalem. And you can see here why Jerusalem was such a big deal. It wasn't just some city on a map. It was the very heart of the nation's identity. It was a symbol of unity, where all the scattered tribes came together. It was the center for worship, the seat of God's justice. It was, quite literally, the city of peace, shalom. And because it was so important, the psalmist gives this command that still resonates today. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. The idea is that your own well-being is directly tied to the well-being of the whole community of faith. To love and pray for the city of peace is to invite that same peace and prosperity into your own life. But, journeys are almost never all joy. The road always has some rough patches. And now the mood shifts. A lot. The pilgrim runs into hardship, even mockery, and the only possible response is to look up in total, humble dependence. Wait, does that sound familiar? It's an echo of Psalm 121. Once again, the pilgrim is lifting up their eyes. But this time, it's not a question of where help comes from. No, this is a direct, focused plea to the one they know is up there in the heavens, the one who is their only source of mercy. To explain this feeling, the psalmist uses this incredibly powerful analogy. Think about it. A servant doesn't make demands. They just watch their master's hand looking for the slightest signal. For food, for a command, for protection. It's the same idea here. The pilgrim's eyes are just locked on the Lord, waiting, expecting, and depending on him to show mercy. It's a posture of complete and total surrender. And right here, we find out what's causing all this pain. It's the scorn, the contempt, from proud people, from those who are just comfortable and at ease. Their insults and their mockery have filled the pilgrim's soul right up to the breaking point, and that's what's driving this desperate, humble plea for God to step in. So, after hitting that rock bottom of desperation, we get this huge turning point. The pilgrim, having begged for mercy, now looks back. But they're not looking back with pain anymore. They're looking back with this deep sense of gratitude, ready to give a testimony about God's incredible deliverance. This opening just sets a super dramatic tone. It's a big what-if statement that the entire community, all of Israel, is invited to declare together. What would have happened to us if God hadn't been on our side? The answer is pretty terrifying, and it just highlights how massive his rescue really was. The psalmist then paints these three super vivid pictures of what would have happened. First, it's like a furious beast was about to swallow them whole. Second, like a raging flood was about to sweep them away. And third, like a hunter's trap was snapping shut. In all three scenarios, destruction looked like a done deal. But God has stepped in. The trap was broken, and like a little bird, their soul escaped. And how does this amazing testimony end? It comes full circle. It lands on the exact same declaration we heard at the very start of the journey, in Psalm 121. The source of our help when we're facing danger is the very same source of our help when we're remembering our deliverance, the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. And this brings us to the final stop on our journey. After experiencing God's protection, his joy, his mercy, and his deliverance, the pilgrim finally arrives at a place of deep, unshakable security. It's a kind of peace that is totally rooted in trusting the Lord. This psalm hits its peak with this powerful image of stability. Trusting in the Lord doesn't just make you feel secure, it makes you as secure as Mount Zion itself, immovable, permanent, lasting forever. You could say this is the ultimate destination of the pilgrim's entire journey, a faith that simply cannot be shaken. The psalmist then draws this really sharp contrast between two different paths. For the righteous, God's protection is like the mountains that surround Jerusalem. It's a complete 360-degree defense, with a promise that evil won't win in the end. But for the wicked, well, their own crooked paths lead to their downfall. True security, the psalm says, comes from being surrounded by God, not from our own strength. So let's wrap this all up. We've just walked through a complete spiritual journey. We started with the anxiety of the open road, where we meet God as our unsleeping protector. Then came the joy of arrival, where we see him as the King of Peace. We felt the desperation of hardship, knowing him as a merciful master, and the relief of being rescued, where he becomes our mighty deliverer. And it all leads to this state of secure confidence, where we know him as our immovable foundation. And that just leaves us with one final question for you to think about. Life is a journey for every single one of us. So as you think about your own path, your own challenges and celebrations, which of these songs speaks to where you are right now? Which one of these songs do you need to be singing today?